Tom Nolan. He is a writer, a photographer, sometimes actor and singer. He lives in New Paltz with his lovely wife, Carol, who's sitting here with us, and 3 cats. As a writer, he favors poetry and short stories that often have a strange twist, to be sure. He recently completed a novel, Second Cutting, and hopes to have it published in the near future. He has been published in Empire State College literary magazine, Many Waters, and one of his poems actually appears in the Mohonk Mountain Stage's 2007 journal, Vanguard Voices of the Hudson Valley. His photographs have appeared in several newspapers and are on display in homes and offices around the country. And he and Steve Lewis have collaborated on a beautiful book on, what's the title of that?
Month on a Barrier Island.
Month on a Barrier Island. So, welcome, Tom.
Well, in keeping with my reputation, this story has perhaps a little bit of a strangeness about it. It's called The Witch of Wishbone Creek. An hour past sunrise, Jonas turned his mules toward a wisp of smoke over a short rise to his right. Cresting the hill, he saw a tiny cabin of chestnut logs with a stone chimney, shedding evidence of a small, efficient wood fire. The stonework spoke of a man skilled in building, as did the small structure it sprang from. The yard sported a well-tended garden, while a rough-sawn rail fence enclosed a corral attached to the beginnings of a barn. The Jersey cow inside the corral raised her head at his approach, then resumed munching from a small haystack. As he halted the mules, the curtain on the front window moved, bony, crooked fingers letting it drop. He dismounted and tethered the team to the fence rail, patting both on their well-muscled necks, and made for the door. Before he reached the front step, it opened, and a woman stepped out. Jonas doffed his sweat-stained hat and stood worrying the brim with both hands. In the seconds before they spoke, he took her measure. Older than his 26 years by a decade, perhaps. Shapely in her checked gingham dress, small and fair with striking green eyes and hair the color of burnished copper. "May I help you, sir?" she said, drying her hands on her apron. Jonas stared. She seemed to grow more beautiful every second. "Are you struck dumb, sir?" He found his tongue. "No, ma'am." He clutched and unclutched the brim of his hat. "I wondered if you might know where I'd find Wishbone Creek. I'm told there's work there." "What sort of work do you do?" "I'm a carpenter and mason, and good at it." He gestured to the chimney in the unfinished barn, adding, "Though not as accomplished as your husband." He saw the hint of a frown on her face and thought her eyes darkened to gray, but in a blink she smiled. "The war took him. Gone these 4 years." Jonas lowered his gaze. "Sorry, ma'am." "You were in the war?" She nodded toward the mules. "Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant in the Ohio Volunteers." She nodded. "Do you have a name?" "Jonas Price, ma'am." He bowed slightly. She smiled. "I am Hannah LeBeau, Mr. Price. Now, what was it you needed?" "Work, ma'am, and I hear it's to be had in Wishbone Creek." "I expect that's true, Mr. Price." Her brow furrowed. "The war did damage too much." Suddenly, her face brightened and he felt his knees go weak under her gaze. "Perhaps, sir, you could assist a widow with your skills?" "Ma'am?" "As you can see, I have a partially completed barn. I would have it finished so that I might move old Bess there," she nodded toward the cow, "and the chickens into winter quarters that did not include my home." She cocked her head to the side and smiled. "I have no money to pay you, but I am a fair cook. I can feed you and mend your clothing and tend your mules. He reassessed the barn. There were enough straight logs a few yards away to yield the lumber if he milled them carefully. The job could be done by late October. It will be my pleasure to complete such a structure. He straightened to his full 6'3". I'm called Jonas by those who know me. Since I now know you, she laughed, a strange cackling sound. Jonas it is. I am Hannah. You can set up next to the barn. The pasture is well fenced and has good growth for your mules. We'll eat as the sun peaks. She disappeared into the house. Jonas pastured the mules, then unloaded the wagon and commenced setting up his sawmill. An exquisite creature, he thought as he worked. He remembered the way the bodice of her dress carved her form. He thought her face the most beautiful he'd ever seen. But when he tried to recall the details, he found they would not come. Scant 2 hours later, he was ready. At the pasture gate, he summoned the mules, harnessed Isaac to the dragline, and brought up a 24-foot yellow pine. Connecting Isaac's harness to the pulley system, he lifted the log to the conveyor, wrestling it into position. Jonas then guided Ishmael to the treadmill and set him walking at a slow, steady pace, spinning the large circular blade. With brute strength and judicious peavy work, he had the log completely milled by the time Hannah called him for the noon meal. As they ate, she remarked on the speed of his work and absence of waste. Blushing, Jonas returned the compliment by admiring the sumptuous repast. All through the meal, he took notice of her features, the blue-gray eyes, the honey-blonde hair, the high cheekbones, slender nose, expressive lips. He committed every detail to memory. Yet, when he returned to his Millrock, he could not bring her image to mind. Jonas worked until near dark, stopping when his keen eye could no longer measure his cuts. He unharnessed the mules and hung both harnesses on the side of the wagon. Hannah appeared as he started to rub down the sweaty animals. That is my job, Jonas, she said, taking the brush from his hand. She brushed them with skill, cooing to him while she worked. As she worked, she turned toward Jonas. Perhaps you'd like to clean up also. I have a tub and soap on the back porch. The water should still be sun-warmed. He unshouldered his suspenders and peeled off his sweaty shirt, tossing it under the wagon seat. He retrieved a clean shirt, then started toward the porch. At the evening meal, he asked if she wanted a milking stanchion and chicken coops in the barn. I believe both are excellent additions, Jonas. He nodded. I thought the same, ma'am. Please, my name is Hannah. Jonas read. I find it hard to be so familiar with a fine-bred woman such as yourself. She laughed that strange cackle. Jonas, I'm not so fine-bred as to want to be treated as a schoolmarm. Her golden locks swept her shoulders as she shook her head. Not fine-bred at all, of a fact. Do call me Hannah. He rose. Hannah, I'd best be getting my rest. I should have the lumber ready in 2 days if the weather holds.